We are the victor of this battlefield. The Islamic Republic of Iran has emerged as a victor. The Iranian people achieved victory. This is not a slogan. This is no exaggeration.
That's the sort of propaganda you might expect from the Iranians, but it actually happens to be something a shipping executive I spoke with tonight backs up. Ship stuck in the Strait for now a long time. He told me, quote, unfortunately, the White House, the U.S., are losers.
This is something you might expect from the filthy brown savages, but I actually talked to a corporate shipping executive and he said the same thing. Like, he said the same thing as the people whose filthy skin is the color of the dirt. This is literally 1955. That's what this fucking bitch just said. This is the type of shit you can expect from the unwashed masses of the Orient, the barbarian rapists. But I actually talked to a civilized guy and he was like, low-key, like, the savages are kind of right. So everybody listening, you should agree with what you heard from this savage, subhuman filth, because there's a corporate exec that runs shipping. A Western. Oh, sorry. I didn't mention he's not an Eastern fucking savage. I'm sorry. Everybody's like, oh, but why am I listening to an executive of a shipping company? He's a Western exec of a shipping company, okay? He's based, dude. His first language is English, French, or Spanish. I love it when my CNN literally says, please, I know you might be scared of the filthy savage, but there's civilized people that agree with him. Live on CNN. This is why a space like mine is fucking necessary. Because the internationals that fill up 75% of this chat, we fucking feel when they say this. We don't just roll through it.
Iran and the United States say that they're close to a deal, an agreement to discuss a deal, except for they are clearly not talking about the same deal. And I'm just going to go through a couple things really quickly to make the point. First, the Strait of Hormuz, right? It's closed. A U.S. official said that, in this initial agreement, the strait would open. And that sounds good, right? Finally, thank God. Well, Araghchi says it will not reopen unless it is under Iranian management and unless there are fees to transit the strait, otherwise known as a toll or whatever you'd like to call it. But they are both things that Trump has said in the past are absolutely no-goes. Okay, so that's the strait. And now what about the thing at the core of all of this, the whole reason that the U.S. went to war in the first place, apparently, which was Iran's nuclear material? The Trump administration official said Iran's nuclear program will be dismantled and that nuclear material will be destroyed and removed. Araghchi says, well, we'll just keep talking. They will only engage in nuclear talks during a 60-day negotiation period following the signing of this thing, which is a memorandum of understanding, which means they're basically agreeing to nothing on the nuclear deal, so they say. A senior U.S. official tells CNN that none of Iran's money is to be released until they perform. This is another crucial thing, right? All that frozen money that you heard about. Remember the pallets of cash that Trump criticized Obama for supposedly releasing to Iran? Iran now says, well, actually, there's money here. $24 billion is going to be released to Iran, half immediately on signing the quote-unquote memorandum.
Aaron, I've been talking to White House officials, senior Trump administration officials all day about this, and what they've consistently tried to say is that the Iranians are messaging internally for their own audiences. This is something you heard a senior administration official tell me and other reporters earlier today as well. They are arguing that what the U.S. is saying is what needs to be believed here, and that Iran, if they are communicating any sort of differences in that, it's because they need to message internally. Now, of course, and I think you make a great point, we've heard 39 times President Donald Trump argue that they are close to a deal just for it to fall apart. But I will say this time does feel different. One, in the conversations that I am having with all of my sources on this, including in the Intelligence Committee, but also with, what we are hearing from foreign leaders. You have the Iranian foreign minister saying that they feel like they are closer to a deal than ever before. And I think what we heard from the Pakistani prime minister was really notable as well when he said that he could confirm that a final agreed upon text for the peace deal had been finalized and they are just working now on the aspect of signing it.
You've been talking to people involved in the negotiations on multiple sides, right? So you've got a lot of incoming here. What are you learning?
So over the last week, the message has sort of coalesced and it's gotten consistent from everybody. So in speaking to regional mediators, the Iranian back channel, and speaking to Pakistanis and also speaking to U.S. officials, it seemed that there was large agreement on most of the aspects of the deal. It was really the sequencing that was the problem, as Elena just laid out. Yeah. It was the money piece that the Iranians were demanding up front without any concessions, which the administration was balking at, because otherwise it would have been simply returning the straits to pre-war conditions for money, which essentially would have been looked at as a bribe, which doesn't work. So the administration wanted more from them up front before they would release funds, and a senior U.S. official today at the Pentagon stressed to me, he said, look, this is absolutely performance-based. This is going to be much bigger and wider in terms of scope than the JCPOA was, and the Iranians are simply not going to get cash for just returning the straits to pre-war conditions. And the White House has made a deliberate decision over the past week not to engage in public discussions about what's in the MOU, given that a large part of this has been face-saving just culturally.
Right. What I'm curious, though, Colonel, when Aragchi calls this a victory for Iran, I mean, if you take a step back, the United States comes at you with, fear and fury, and they do a lot of damage. And yet here you are at 3.5 months later, you still control the Strait of Hormuz. 70% of your missiles are still there. You still have your highly enriched uranium, although some of it's probably very difficult to get to because of bombing. So, you look at this and can say, well, all of this for what? I mean, when you talk about the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, there's one thing. You can kind of be vague about a lot of stuff, right? You can be vague about highly enriched uranium. You can be vague. One guy can say one thing, one can say the other. Who's really going to know? But everybody's going to know about the Strait.
Absolutely, Aaron. And one of the key things here is that this has to be seen, from Araghchi's standpoint, it is a victory from a strategic perspective.
Right.
Because we're not going back, as Alex was mentioning, we're not going back to the status quo ante. We're not going back to the period before the war. We're going into something completely new. And that's something that's completely new is actually going to affect way more than just the Strait of Hormuz. Because now what we're looking at is the potential for this kind of control, if you will, from other countries of other straits like the Bab el-Mandeb. So the Houthis could do something similar there in the entrance to the Red Sea. Or, not that they're going to do it.
Surprisingly very good analysis. This is the start of multipolarity going into sixth gear, not only from the perspective of the anti-American opposition, but also from the perspective of countries that have been traditionally allied to the United States of America, because they unironically are starting to realize that there is far more to lose in certain cases than there is to gain by putting themselves in the same tent as the U.S. Especially, you got to keep in mind, leaving the American field of influence does not mean that you immediately sign a contract with Moscow or with Beijing. Especially Beijing, but also Moscow to an extent, and Tehran as well, are playing this, in my opinion, brilliant game where they're just telling you, just don't sign up with the Americans, and we will give you plenty of benefits. You do not have to become the same type of pro-American saluting comrade when it comes to your relationship with us in Moscow or with us in Beijing, and even to a smaller extent, but still to us in Rio de Janeiro. All of these competing powers are giving a very, very, very lucrative option to people that are moving away from the States, because they're telling them, you don't have to become anti-American, my friend. You don't even have to become our quasi-vassal the way you were when it came to your relationship with the Americans. The only thing we ask of you is to become neutral on our relationship with the Americans. It is the sort of first step towards multipolarity, which does not call upon nations to make these radical steps of choosing a side. Quite to the contrary, they're calling upon us to not choose a side, right? A very smart play. And especially Beijing does that. Beijing, for example, I can talk about two Balkan countries, to an extent Serbia, and to a smaller extent, but still important, Bosnia, where China is kind of telling them, listen, guys, I know you have your particular positions, your contradictions. You are trying to exist like small countries, etc., etc. We will give you plenty of benefits, and we do not require you to link to Beijing. The only thing we ask of you is to not directly link yourself to the West. Understand what I'm saying? It's a pitch that used to be extremely lucrative, but now looks even better for one very simple reason. The Americans are throwing every single ally that they've had under the bus because they're not consulting with them when they commit heinous acts of war crime that also has direct material influence on their allies who never see it coming. Look at Saudi Arabia. Look at the United Arab Emirates. Look at every single one of these categories. So from one side, I'm trying to simplify this as much as possible, not because I do not respect your intellect, quite to the contrary, because I think because, chat, you are very smart, you sometimes overthink things. The main reason most nations are now going to be inspired to leave the American sphere of influence is not because opposite side is incredible benefits for doing so. They're not giving them incredible benefits for joining their side. They are simply telling them, don't be on a side, and we will throw money at you without any potential drawbacks. That's it. That's the pitch. It's a brilliant pitch. Sorry, but it's a brilliant pitch. Even if I was a right-wing patriot, even if I was a nationalist, fuck it, even if I was a son of a banker that happens to be in power in a particular 7 to 25 million people republic, country, monarchy, or whatever the fuck, and I was looking out at the same time, sure, about this metaphysical idea of my flag and my anthem and my people, whatever little tribe, ooh, Here we do not take nationalists seriously. I apologize if you're one of those. God bless. Please stay here. We're going to develop your brain a little bit, hopefully. But in parallel with my flag and my pride and my people, I also get to ensure that the status of my class gets to grow unimpeded. My bourgeoisie gets to grow unimpeded from the shackles of capitalists from abroad, because capitalists compete amongst capitalists, especially capitalists from the imperial court do compete. Like, this is not bullshit. Capitalists from Washington collaborate with capitalists from Moscow and Beijing and Delhi and Rio de Janeiro and so on. But they also want to eat each other. Like, they don't necessarily like each other. They collaborate because that is currently incentivized by the market dynamics that exist between them. But if they can help the situation to lead to a particular opportunity in which they can consume, literally, metaphorically, and sometimes very physically, because capitalists do be eating people. I'm kidding. They would, right? If TLDR, if somebody comes to me and tells me, if you take a step outside of the American sphere of influence, it's going to be good for you. And you tell them, okay, but I can't, dude, the Americans are going to fuck me up the ass if I start opening Chinese bases on my territory, if I start allowing Russian intelligence officers on my territory, and they just stop you. They're like, shh, it's okay. You don't have to do any of this. As long as you leave the American sphere of influence, you will get two benefits. One is direct benefits from us, and the other one is much more important. What is the other one? We talk about this all the time here. What is the other one? Who are the people with the highest chance of survival on a sinking ship? The ones that get off the earliest. But now in this allegory, there's 50 ships around the sinking ship. Who are the people with the highest survival chance, but also that will get the nicest ranks and positions once they reach the other ship? The guys that get off of it first and the guys that climb on the other one as quick as possible. So in this metaphor that I'm trying to introduce to you, the death of unipolarity will birth two categories. One category which simply leaves the original ship and gets many benefits, or opposing teams will be very, very, very welcoming to their abandoning of said ship. And the second category, the more important category, but one that we will have to wait for a little bit to start manifesting, is people that leave the ship and then join another one. The pitch is very simple. The American ship is sinking. We will not take you seriously if you leave it in 40 years when it's already at the bottom of the ocean. Leave it now, speed up its sinking, yes, and you will be rewarded in kind. But the Americans are not stupid, don't get me wrong. The Americans are giving a counter offer that is massive. And what is that one? To continue our allegory of ships, it is one that says, yes, sure, our ship is sinking, but we actually have a secret button we can press that will spawn a smaller ship outside of the ship. This entire ship got a little container inside of it with a ship that actually carries the engine, aka the capital, the cannons, aka the weapons, the coal, aka the oil, that will vacate the carcass of the larger one, abandon the dead weight, but it will continue to live 10 times better than any of the other ships, objectively, because this has been building it for a very long time. Continue living objectively far better than them for a very long amount of time. So, in this allegory of mine, on the sinking American ship, the Americans at some point will look at their friends in Germany, in South Korea, in Japan, in Poland, and in Spain, and in Tunisia, and in Argentina, and in Mexico. It does not matter which particular country I use. And they will tell them, sure, there are great options on the other ships, but how about you, France, betray Germany? How about you, Argentina, betray Brazil? How about you, Nigeria, piss in the mouth of the Ghanaians? And we will make sure you have a place on our ark. You will buy your time into the continuation of this no longer look. It is like the Lord has shined upon me with this contrast. You will buy your way into prolonging your relationship to a dying unipolarity. The only thing you have to do is abandon your former allies. That is going to be the American pitch towards destabilizing South America. That is going to be the American decline pitch towards destabilizing Europe And don't even get me started on good old Asia and good old Africa. The future of multipolarity begins with one very simple choice for every single allied American nation. One very simple bet that is not simple, but actually one of the greatest bets that we, as representatives of these republics on this here land, can ever have to choose from. The bet is the following. Do I abandon the ship early, or do I risk it for great benefits, stay loyal, and hope that when the Americans start shafting everybody, that they don't shaft me? Because yes, it would be in your interest in the not short but medium term to remain on the Americans' good side, because they are a force to be reckoned with, but only as long as that bet fulfills itself. For the nations that have not even abandoned the ship, or God forbid, went and boarded other ships, that have remained on the American ship when it transforms into its more lean version during the age of strife that is coming to us, that the extra skin of American empire that American empire will abandon because it cannot sustain it, that extra skin will be the future nations of impoverished, cuckold, diseased chaos. They will be the Libyas of the future. And to an extent, their leaderships at least will have deserved to be members of the eternal graveyard of history. Let us just hope the proud men, women, and enemies of those people can somehow either be co-opted towards our cause, for they have experienced the greatest contradiction, the complete collapse of their state, or that they maybe can be even to an extent consumed by neighboring nations and in a form of semi-righteous imperialism be saved from pure, unadulterated chaos. The GCC bet on the American ship, and the U.S. tossed them overboard immediately when the boat started leaking. That's very fair. It's a bleak outlook. Did you listen to anything I said, my love? How is that a bleak outlook? It is neither bleak or positive. I am just telling you that as multipolarity is being built, people can choose two things. Nations can choose two things. Government can choose two things. Whether to abandon a decaying, dying, sinking ship early or abandoning it late. History will judge them for the rest of time whether they made that decision early on or whether they made the decision late. That's it. So that's not bleak. It's opportunity. Multipolarity is incredible opportunity, especially for those of us who have not had the privilege of being born on the west of the fucking Atlantic and north of fucking El Paso. But we will not forget, because the Americans do forget us. We will not forget the Americans. It is also a great opportunity for them to limit the potential fucking blowback that comes to their fucking shores by waking up on time and pushing for multipolarity on time. So that the last memory we have of the Americans when multipolarity enters the fucking spiel, 10 years down the line, 50, 60, 150, when it enters the spiel, for us to remember good comrades from the United States of America that helped us facilitate this internationalist world, because then they will have no fucking consequences. But if it is America and Americans of current status that we remember, oh, God damn it, you better get your fucking passports.
Necessarily, but pick a place like the Strait of Malacca by Singapore and Indonesia.
Yep.
You could have all these countries trying to exert some kind of control, in essence exacting tolls or service fees or whatever they want to call them over these areas. This is diametrically opposed to the U.S. policy, which was that freedom of navigation would be key through all of these areas. So this is going to have impacts on the economy. This is going to have impacts on a lot of different things, as well as our ability to posture our forces properly.
I mean, Alex, it's, you can use whatever analogy you want. Pandora's box has been opened. The horses are out of the barn. The genie's out of the bottle, whatever it is, right? You cannot go back. I remember last summer standing on the Strait of Hormuz when that aspect of the war was happening and saying, well, this is the threat. Sure. But they'd never done it. It was a threat. And now it's been done. It can never be undone, right? Things have changed.
They fundamentally have changed, and they've learned progressively over the last year, not only from the
war, but literally only from the war. You said that you're attacking them because they cannot have nuclear missiles. People ask you why can they not have nuclear missiles. More honest people in the administration literally said they cannot have nuclear missiles because that would allow Iran to do whatever they want in perpetuity, basically saying that they do not want Iran to have sovereignty. We really got to go in there in order to ensure that Iran does not have full-on sovereignty. Most chatters here in this community know that sovereignty equals basically being able to say, I will murder 100,000 New Jerseyans if you do anything to me. That is what sovereignty in the unipolar American world order means, okay? Sovereignty means I have the ability to blow up white people in Brooklyn. That is 100% of everything that sovereignty means for any country on planet Earth when we are talking about existing in a unipolar world order where Americans are on top. Sovereignty means you blow up my kid's head, I get to blow up your kid's head. We are not comparing economic decline in America versus my child's limbs in my hands. But to the surprise led by the great Islamic path, I guess, revolutionary path, the Iranians figured out a less violent approach to true sovereignty, a less violent approach to assure mutual destruction, which is one that assures economic mutual destruction, not one that incorporates direct death of anybody. And that is the Strait of Hormuz. They simply said, we don't need a real nuclear missile. We have an economic nuclear missile. You attack us, we close this strait, and your oil markets start crying like little hoes.
The 12-day war last summer, but now from this one. So they started out with a nuclear program that they decided not necessarily to pursue a weapon, but sort of in the background as a means of strategic deterrence. The 12-day war taught them that their ballistic missiles could serve as an effective strategic deterrent against Israel. And now in this portion of the conflict, they've learned that low-cost drones and projectiles could hold the straits at risk without actually having to mine them. So they hadn't done it before, but the traditional plans for mining the straits went out the window. And so even now, if it's rhetoric versus reality and they don't actually control the straits, they say that they control, we don't recognize it, it's kind of a face-saving measure. At any point in the future, if they still retain drones or missile capabilities, they could theoretically do this again anytime that they wanted to, provide the regime is still in power.
Israel doesn't like this, okay? They don't like the deal. They wanted to get rid of the regime. They wanted to finish the job, and they got Trump on board, and now...
Is she going to ask, do the Jews have anything to do with this? Do the Jews have anything to do with this decision?
The two roads are diverging. But the question is, who's going to call the shots there? Israel has a lot of cards it can play if it doesn't want this deal.
I'll be right back. I got to piss. This beer is killing me.